Okay, let's start, Priya.
Okay. Good morning, good evening, everyone. My name is Priya Samant, and I'm very honored to be moderating the panel, Women's Leadership in the Time of COVID Crisis. A very important discussion at the times that we are right now in. You know, we are all forced to stop and reflect for our roles as human and the effects that we have on the planet we are blessed to live on. My observation, and I think it was everyone's observation, that preparedness was lacking globally to face this pandemic. However, countries led by women seem to be particularly successful in fighting the virus. With all this in backdrop, I would like to open up this conversation with Honorable Madam Sujata Koirala, the former
Thank you.
Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Nepal. Sujata ji, welcome. You are the second female leader to be elected to the office of the Prime Minister, which is the highest office in the history of your country. Can you please share your work in brief as a female leader, what it is to be a female leader in the highest office of the government?
Wow. I thank you, Priya ji, moderator, for the kind introduction. And it is a great pleasure to join the web panel of global women intellectuals and UN women ambassadors to talk on women leadership during COVID-19 crisis. Well, I have been working as a social worker, and I'm also a member of parliament. And I work for the community, and we have also hospital, which plastic and reconstructive surgery hospital, and we are treating all village people. I'm a standing committee member, ICAP, International Conference of Asian Political Parties. I go to different conferences, and I'll give you a little bit introduction of this Asian political parties. The International Conference of Asian Political Parties is a common platform for political parties in Asia to exchange dialogues, views, and cooperation. Through this platform, we discuss each other's politics, economy, social, and technical aspects. We exchange our experiences through regular meetings. This is an excellent platform for all political parties in Asia to progress as a common entity. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, we are forced to hold our conferences through online. And there we have been discussing the role of political parties and the state in combating the spread of the pandemic and how Asia as a whole can cooperate together. We share our experiences of the impact the coronavirus has made in our respective countries and what we are doing to mitigate and eventually defeat this pandemic. The main intention of the conference itself was on how Asian countries could work together during such difficult times, while also sharing challenges and obstacles in our states. It helped a lot in understanding the situation of other countries and their action plan to resolve this crisis. In Asia, some countries are more prosperous than others, and some are more technologically advanced than the rest. My belief is that if we remain disciplined and united, we can overcome these tough times. The United States and Europe are badly suffering at the moment. Asia has been fortunate enough not to suffer in the same magnitude, but we are also in great trouble, as you all know, in terms of industrial development, economy, and population. Asia remains one of the largest continents in the world. Disturbances in this part of the region will impact the whole world. That is why it is more important for us in Asia to prevent and eradicate this pandemic as soon as possible. Asia's contribution to global GDP is about 42%. That is quite high. So this is the situation right now we are discussing on. And can I say some more? Can I speak more about
Yes, so I was actually going to ask you a follow-up question on this, is that Nepal was the first country in South Asia to actually report the COVID-19 case, and it was in January where most of the world started actually taking notice of it and learning about the gravity of this whole thing.
Yeah.
And also, if you see that South Asia is the interest to the world for the opportunities that it brings, and especially Nepal from tourism and other trade things that it has. So, can you please share how will Nepal and in the whole South Asia emerge from this crisis? Because there's a total disruption in the speed and the scale of globalization because of this.
This is an extraordinary time for all of us. Corona crisis has come to us as a global health emergency. Nepal detected the first COVID-19 on January 22nd, 2020. Majority of the corona cases have come from returnees from India or Europe or Gulf countries. The large number of coronavirus cases are reported to be imported one. Government machinery is being mobilized to monitor and regulate the open border with India. Yes, South Asia offers immense opportunities for development. Its diversity is rich and acts as unifying force to make full use of huge opportunities available in South Asia region. Countries in the region have come together. We have South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SAARC, as you know, to bring all countries together in one platform. I feel it is time to revive SAARC and work together. March together and cooperate with each other. In times of corona crisis, we must show solidarity, not to work in isolation. SAARC comes handy for such kind of cooperation, unity, and solidarity. Regarding globalization, there is a second thought about it. Corona crisis has gripped the world and disrupted the speed.
Excuse me, can I stop you for a moment just to ask you, because there's a lot of interference somewhere else, and I think because we can't hear you, I just wondered if we could maybe isolate where that's coming from before we carry on, because we're missing a lot. Somebody has the microphone on, it's not muted, and there are children talking in the back, and I can't hear what the speaker's saying.
Yes, so actually...
Can you unmute, please?
Yeah, so the host has the control, so just keep everybody else, I will be unmuted and the speaker who is speaking, rest everybody should be muted because it's very difficult for others to hear.
Right.
And we have to be very sensitive of the time that we have, and there's so much to cover. So thank you everybody for your time, for joining, but we need you to be muted at all times so this can go very smoothly.
Okay, did you go ahead? Honorable Sudha, did you go ahead?
Okay, now shall I speak something on women?
Yes, go ahead.
Women issue? Little bit, I have to, I think.
Yes.
Do you have any other question?
No, I will come back to you later, but you can finish what your thoughts were.
Yeah, okay. I have so many. Okay, now it is not a mere coincidence that many of the countries that have dealt effectively with the virus are strong democracies, including Germany, Iceland, New Zealand, Norway, and Finland. They all are headed by women. Closer home in South Asia, women leaders have been able to govern effectively in a democratic manner. In Bangladesh, despite multiple of problems and influx of about 1 million refugees in the country, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has been handling challenges in her best way at this crisis time. These women leaders have been effective in containing the spread of coronavirus. They have put in place strategies to tackle COVID-19 cases. They have shown compassionate approach and close attention to the difficulties of the people. We need to learn from them and apply the best practices to better this situation here. Now, I'm worried that some of the rulers are using pandemic as a cover to consolidate power and privilege and making intrusion into personal freedom. Free flow of information, fact-based debate about policy options, the voluntary self-organization of civil society and open engagement between government and the people are vital assets in combating the pandemic. Accountability and transparency are very important. Now, I want to tell you a little bit also about Nepal. Many countries are without effective legal arrangements. Their journey should be towards full participation for women and girls in far from over. They have the lowest participation in parliaments and legislatures. Women had played a significant role in Nepal for establishing democracy in Nepal. The Constitution of Nepal, promulgated in 2015, guarantees 33% representation in the parliament. At the local level, representation in provinces and municipalities and villages, the representation is 40%. Nepal is developing women participation through institutional arrangements at the center, province, and local levels. Nepal Women Commission is the focal point for all these efforts. So we feel that women's empowerment started from the grassroots level is vital to address the challenges. We should give good education, healthcare to women, and make them participate in economics and politics. We should ensure economic independence for women. Women should be given loans to improve their educational base, health, legal, economic, and political opportunities. In some countries, at the end, I want to say last few words. In some countries, we still read news reports that women are not enjoying equality under law. Also in Nepal, the same property rights, same rights of association and mobility. They face double day taxing, employment, and full responsibility for housework and childcare. It is so painful to note that some societies are still treating women as mere instrument of the ends of others, reproductive engines, sexual outlets, and agents of a family general property. They are abused and marginalized even in 21st century. Thank you. Thank you, Priyaji.
Thank you so much, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you so much. So I had seen Teresa was here with us, but she's joining us from Brazil. So I think she has some technical difficulties, but I'll come back to her. So my next question is to Chidi. If you can unmute yourself, please. You are the most influential woman in government and business, civil societies organization in Nigeria. So we would love to learn about your work as the founder of Donors for Africa Foundation. And I would like to you to keep it really brief, maybe a very high level, 2 minutes. And then I want to go into the question with you, with what actually is happening on the ground with women and the COVID crisis.
Thank you so much, Priya. It's a pleasure to meet everyone, and all protocols duly observed because of our time constraints. My name is Chidi Coldsweat, and I currently lead activities at Donors for Africa Foundation. And basically, we work with leading government agencies, philanthropy organizations, nonprofits, impact-driven institutions, and then private sector companies as well, to advocate for increased financing for the Sustainable Development Goals on the continent. So far, we have trained about 400 nonprofit organizations. We've raised in funding about $349,000, and we continue to reach an average of 15,000 people weekly. And literally, our messaging is, if you cannot empower the organizations and the institutions and the individuals leading change on the continent, how can we say we are doing any work targeted at the nonprofits, targeted at the Sustainable Development Goals? So that's just me in summary, and that's my life work at the moment. Thank you, Priya.
Thank you. So Chidi, my question is, Nigeria was very successful in combating the Ebola virus in 2014. Can you please share, during the Corona crisis, how are you working with the governments and the leading organization to implement change at the grassroots level?
So our the very core of the work started off as a sensitization campaign. And then with the government launching the victim support funds, we were able to get a few of the indigenous organizations we work with to receive palliatives and also disseminate within their immediate communities. Now, because these NGOs have been working in the sector for a long time, they are more aware of who the most threatened individuals or households were in those communities. And when they became part of the victim support funds, or when they received the victim support funds, they were able to disseminate those palliatives to those families at the grassroots levels. Something else, again, that we were able to do in terms of a more senior or a more leadership perspective was that we began to collate key information, research on the current trends around COVID-19. We were predicting what we should expect to happen, especially in the nonprofit sector, right after COVID-19. So post-COVID, what was going to be the reality of a lot of us on ground? And how can we prepare nonprofits or impact-driven organizations for these new realities? So while we were conducting this research, we focused on issues around peace and global health, education, even for children who were living with learning disabilities. How is it impacting nutrition for families and access to food and those healthy alternatives? How is it impacting businesses, and what were the possible solutions? How can tech come into play in the work we do to improve some of our commitments towards the SDGs, as well as preparing us for post-COVID-19 situations? So this particular report is being collated and should be announced at the end of May 31st, which is basically saying this is what we believe the government should do going forward, preparing not just nonprofits, but also sector leaders to prepare for the post-COVID-19 realities. That's what we've been doing so far. Thank you, Priya.
That's really amazing. So my next question is to Dr. Queen Blessing. Hello, thank you for joining us. And so we are very much, first of all, interested to learn about your work as the founder of GEM, which is a very, very beautiful word, a global empowerment movement. So please let us know what it is all about.
Yes, thank you so much for organizing this, Priya. We really appreciate this. We need this, we need to keep engaging ourselves on these very important topics. Yeah, GEM, Global Empowerment Movement, is the organization that I founded in 2015 and is accredited by the United Nations ECOSOC. So I do quite a lot of several events at the United Nations, advocating for the empowerment of women and youths. especially with a focus on single mothers and their children, abandoned single mothers and children. And the organization is actually having an affiliate in Africa, Blessings of Africa Empowerment Foundation. So in that regard, we're able to not just focus on our communities here in America, because I'm based in America, originally from Africa myself, Nigeria, but also, work with people on ground in Africa through Blessings of Africa Empowerment Foundation, an affiliate of a global empowerment movement. So that way we are working with communities here and communities back in Africa as well.
So my question to you, Dr. Blessing, is as a public health practitioner and a humanitarian working on various impact-based initiatives, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing the African diaspora is currently facing during this pandemic and isolation phase? Because, the news that are coming out, and especially what happened in Georgia, was really heartbreaking. So what is the ground reality?
Yeah, I think, first of all, when we talk about African diaspora, we know that the COVID-19 is of course a terrible crisis. It's a global issue. But when you talk about African diaspora, people look at us like maybe we're referring to people that came from Africa to America alone. And so I would definitely want to make a distinction or try to explain what that really means, so that way we are both on the same page as to what is truly going on with our own community. I'm the chair of the African Union CIS region, USA. It's also a foundation that is focused on uniting people of African descent. So when you say African diaspora, what you're really saying is people of African descent, in different communities across the globe. So, but now you're talking about focusing it in America and focusing it in Georgia. So basically African diaspora is referred to as people of African descent, like I said, Blacks in the Black community. It's heartbreaking to see what is going on in the news. Definitely, in as much as we try not to focus this on just the Black community, because it's a global issue, it's a global phenomenon that has really wreaked havoc, but it's also very, heartbreaking to see that according to the figures that you see compiled by the non-partisan APM Research Lab, and they have just released this week, that people, actually the title of the research is Color of Coronavirus. And the evidence is showing that across the country, African diaspora, in quotes, right? African have died at a rate of more than 50%, of the people compared to, the other race. So this is the reason why I wanted to make the distinction of when you say African diaspora, definitely you're just really referring to Black communities, because in that same report, it just says more than 20,000 African Americans said about 1 in 2,000 of the entire Black population in the US have died from the disease. So that shows you right there that this has really wreaked havoc in the Black community. And so when we say African diaspora, I just wanted people to understand that when you say African diaspora, we're not saying people that came from Africa, immigrants here alone. We're also referring to people of African descent in America, whether they came here through the transatlantic slavery by force, or we came here like us that came voluntarily lately, because we're in search of greener pastures. But the fact of the matter is that the same issues plague the community, the Black community. And the after effect of that migration, what it has created is exactly the same reason why the same challenges that we face in Black communities, because during this transatlantic slavery, of course, we know about the racial discrimination, we know about economic disparity, we know about the health disparity, we know about the poverty level. So these are the major reasons why when you talk about African diaspora, we talk about Black community. Yes, it's a mess. A lot of people have died. the disease is terrible, but because of our own situation, based on the migration, based on the consequence of that racial discrimination, based on the disparity, you have more of these issues in our community. We don't want anyone, whether Black or white or Latino, we do not. One person dying is a problem already. We do not want anybody to die. So, but again, when you look at the disparities in the community, the challenge is great. So this is why my focus has always been empowering our community. Global Empowerment Movement empowers people in different communities. We have people from Asia as well as part of our organization. But I also know that when we focus on developing communities in different countries, in different areas, like in Georgia, for example, developing communities here. Even in America, I often say when I talk about developing communities and problems of poverty at the United Nations or in Africa, people often ask me, they don't seem to understand that we have the same issues here. And poverty is really at the peak right here. They don't seem to see that when you're talking about poverty in Africa, for example. They look at America as, you got it all going, you got it all together. But the fact of the matter is that poverty is poverty everywhere. It's the peak at which it is here is now being exposed during this COVID. That even here in America, even here in Georgia, just like other communities, Black communities, really have issues with this economic development. And we know, many of us feel like it is the transatlantic slavery, the brain drain from Africa, and people trying to struggle in different communities is what has created part of this. But that is where my focus is. That's where my organization is focused on, whether with the African Union CIS region that I mentioned. I'm the chair of that here in the US and in Georgia. Our goal is uniting us to be able to work together, because until we work together, until we see these issues in the community, in the Black community, as issues that affect us, we're going to continuously have the same things. So this is why we are stronger together is my message, is our message. We have to empower each other, empower one another, and see us as a better people together when we work together. I'll stop at that.
Wow. This is really incredible work. I mean, the wealth of knowledge, I mean, the information you all are sharing, it's so valuable. And thank you to everyone for what you all are doing in your own communities and countries. So now I move to India. Rami, can you please unmute yourself?
Sure. Hi, Priya. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining. So you're the advisor to the Center of Soft Power for India's prestigious think tank, India Foundation.
Yes.
So first of all, please let us know about your work as advisor to the foundation, and then also as an author. You're also a published author.
Correct. So I'd like to take a couple of your minutes, Priya, if that's okay, to explain what we do and what I have done on different levels. But before I begin, I'd like to thank Mr. Somrat Ghimre and the GP Koirala Foundation. I'd like to thank you and all other organizers for making such a stellar effort to bring us all together from across the world, but also importantly, give us an opportunity to share and connect with each other. Yes, I've been a part of India Foundation, which is based out of New Delhi, for a really long time now, so almost a decade. And I am an independent researcher as well. And I think I've had many opportunities to pursue my specialization, which is anthropology, sociology of religion, theology, and especially the role of religion in society through these organizations. India Foundation started about 10 years ago. We started small, but today it certainly is one of the foremost think tanks in the country. And we focus on security, international affairs, and one of our latest centers is the Center of Soft Power, which is amongst a few other centers that we have. Of course, we've managed to create this wonderful fraternity through the foundation, which includes intellectuals, politicians, academicians, and mind you, politicians from across party lines and across the world. We've also developed some of the finest platforms in the country for intellectual thought and debate. And this forms a part of our annual conclaves, which is subject relevant. These conclaves bring in people again from international walks of life. And the recent one was in February. And maybe if anybody wants to know a little more, you could Google India Ideas Conclave, which we are in our 6th edition. I am today the advisor of the Center of Soft Power, which is a part of India Foundation. It is one of the first centers of its kind in India, and it focuses on a field that's picking up very quickly across the world, and that's soft power. We want to focus on research in the area of soft power, and I truly believe that soft power is probably one of the kindest, sorry, there's a fly here, one of the kindest, most natural, humane forms of diplomacy that we have in the world today. And leveraging it would make it extremely important for us in India. And I also think it's extremely crucial towards better understanding between nations, between cultures, between people. We actually happened to organize our first conference last year, Conference of Soft Power, which brought together practitioners, academicians, experts from across the world to deliberate on Indian soft power, with the hope that in the future, India can understand and influence its role in the international order. But I must also shed a little light on the work India Foundation has been doing during the pandemic as well. We've been fairly active. We have a huge network of very active youth, and we've created what we call is a youth alliance against Corona. We have connected all these young people across the country who are now responsible for stepping in for their communities. We've divided them on the basis of locality to help people in need. For example, a lot of the young people are organizing food for the elderly who cannot go out under lockdown, or delivering ration to those who don't have any, or spreading awareness about safety and sanitation during this pandemic. I'd also like to shed a little bit of light, and it'll just take a moment or two more, on another think tank that I have set up and was the founder director of, which is interesting because it was in the northeast of India. The northeast of India is the area that has its borders common to Myanmar, to China, to Bangladesh. It has been a fairly troubled region. It's also been remote in the sense of it is physically very distant from the rest of India. And I set up an institute there called the Northeast Policy Institute to look typically into the areas that needed further understanding and research towards integration. We did a lot of groundbreaking work on demographic change, illegal immigration, amongst many others. And my books that you mentioned, the book that came out late last year, Rajshri Bhagyachandra and the Bhakti Movement in East Indian Literature, is the outcome of the many years that I've spent in the Northeast on the field. And my book that is coming out, hopefully, by the end of this year is on NSCN, which is one of the longest running conflicts and insurgencies in the Northeast, and one of the major reasons that the region has been very distant psychologically in our minds, even though we are from India, but from a different region. So the book is based on a lot of my fieldwork over a decade, as well as interviews from insurgent leaders that have led this insurgency. Other than that, of course, I write for a lot of journals and magazines. I appear on national television debates on social and political issues. As I mentioned before, I also concentrate a fair bit on my independent research. But lastly, and not the least, I run a small organization that works with women artisans. While I was in the Northeast, I met a lot of women who had, due to the conflict, had lost the main breadwinners in their family atypically male members, and had been left with their children and their extended families to look after themselves. A lot of them depended on their indigenous knowledge of arts and weaving to create an income. And while I was there, out of sheer emotions, I thought it was really important to connect them to buyers and to have training and intervention on product design so that they can actually make this into a career. Now, this doesn't only help them with a livelihood, but mind you, it also preserves dying arts. And during this pandemic, I'm very proud to say so that these women have really come into their own. They've taken the onus and the responsibility of making a difference to their communities. They have hand-stitched thousands of masks, which they have distributed free of cost, which is a lot when you don't come for much. There's also an organization called iLead, which I'd like to mention, which is doing a great job by documenting the contribution of these women. And I think I truly believe, Priya, that such generosity can only give us hope for a little better future soon to come. Yes, so with that, I'd like to thank all of you for your patience, for hearing me. Back to you, Priya.
Thank you so much. Looks like the fly is really bugging you.
My God, it's come out of nowhere. Just decided it would come when I start.
No problem, no problem. I was just trying to make a light move.
Correct. Continue.
So I have a question for you, Rami.
Yes.
So for a population of 1.3 billion people, India has done really phenomenal with the strict lockdown to combat this virus. However, in the national as well as in the international news, we have been seeing a lot about the migrant worker issues. Can you please shed some light on this?
Absolutely, Priya. First of all, I'm so happy you asked this question because without a doubt, the migrant issue has touched everyone's hearts. To see how fellow Indians suffer is not easy for us. But at the outset, I'd like to point out that we have over 40 million migrants and only a fraction is moving, which does seem like a lot to other countries, but in perspective to our population, it still is a fraction. But more importantly, we also need to question if it is a result of government apathy as projected by some media, which I have seen, or is it the cost of pandemic politics? My many years of research and groundwork and field work has taught me that, and this is one of the most important things that it's taught me, is that the devil is in the details. And it's very important when you look at things that you don't have access to, let's say physically, you aren't looking at the situation, to go into the details. And if you go into the details of the migrant issue, you might be surprised. First of all, we have to understand who the players are in this situation. There are three players. One is the central government. One is the state government, which in many states is different from the central government. It's the state governments where the migrants are coming in from. The third is the state governments that are receiving these migrants. The central government's role is to provide transportation, to provide trains, which are fairly good, I must tell you. They're sanitized multiple times a day. Food is free, water is free, the cost of tickets are free. The central government also crucially decides the standard operating procedure of the transfer of migrants, which is really, really important because with a set standard operating procedure, this sort of mass movement organization becomes much easier. The state governments, which are mostly opposition states, so which means that the government that is in the center may or may not be in the states as well, have decided not to follow the standard operating procedure of sending these migrants to their home states. By standard operating procedure, I mean that you need to book trains, you need to provide the state that is sending these migrants needs to provide a list of names of these migrants to the receiving state. They also need to provide their COVID documentation, which means whether they've been tested or not. This is helpful to the receiving state because they can ascertain whether these passengers are really from their state. They can organize quarantine facilities, they can organize food, they can organize accommodation, they can organize transportation further into their villages because these states are very, very large. In addition, the central government offers approximately 1,200 trains a day. Opposition-run states have consistently booked far less trains compared to states of the same party at the center. I have checked the details. The difference is huge. You'll be surprised. And I'll give you an example. For instance, Uttar Pradesh, which is run by the same party that is at the center, has booked over 800 trains to bring migrants back, and to ferry them up and down. But opposition-run states like Rajasthan or West Bengal have only booked about 19 to 30 odd trains, whereas the majority of the migrants are coming in from these states. Now, the simple logic that I employ here is if the majority of the migrants are moving on foot from these states, then why do they have the lowest bookings of trains? Also, why are these states not ensuring the welfare of migrants? You see, when the lockdown was announced, the central government made it very clear that states are responsible for the migrants. By being responsible means that migrants have to stay put in their states. They shouldn't move and they shouldn't have any reason to move because the state would look after their housing, the state would look after their food, the state would look after any other such necessities that may have. My guess here would be that it makes for great visuals. It makes for great visuals of a nation and a government that is losing control. And these are the details in the, these are the devil in the details that we need to focus on when we look at situations like this. Having said that, and I'm not going to be completely negative about this, having said that, there are a lot of opposition-led states that have not employed these methods of petty politics. For example, Kerala, which is down south, is an opposition-led state. It has risen above petty politics and has looked after their migrants, wherein they're not moving. They, once you give them their basic necessities, they really feel no need to move. And if the few that are moving, Kerala has been very responsible and it's booked their trains in a timely order. It's followed the SOP. It has sent details to the receiving states. I understand at times like this, one needs to come together and be united. But I feel it's also, when we talk about things like this, it's also really important to not be blind to the invisible hand behind these situations. I know I have a time limit on this, so I would like to say, Priya, if you have any follow-up questions, I'll be happy to answer. But if anybody would like to delve into this further, I'd be happy to discuss this in private as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rami. I mean, each one of you, the conversation that's coming, I'm definitely sure that, the audiences and, this recording will further be, live, will in everybody's networks. There will be a lot of follow-up questions and I'll be very happy to share that information. So now I would like to go next is to Jani. She's one of the, incredible woman I had the opportunity to know in 2016, where we both were advisor member to Secretary Clinton's tech policy team. So Jani, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I would, our audiences would just like to know about your work. What is the title Vice Chair of the Asian Diversity Council? What are the primary responsibilities that stand for? And then I will actually go into the question that I have in respect with the virus.
Sure. And again, thank you for including me on such a distinguished panel. I loved hearing what everyone had to say before me and what everyone will have to say after I speak. But my background is as a corporate lawyer. I actually recently retired as the general counsel of a multinational technology company. But as Priya mentioned, I continue to serve on several corporate and nonprofit boards and advisory councils, one of which is the Comcast NBC Universal Joint External Diversity Council, and I'm actually the vice chair of the Asian American sub-council within that larger council. And the Comcast NBC Universal Diversity Council was actually created in 2011. It was came out of the merger of Comcast, which traditionally was a cable TV services provider, with NBC Universal, NBC being one of the major television channels, and Universal Studios, which was one of the major movie studios. And it really was born out of several commitments that the combined company was making to its community and to some very important constituencies. So the council was formed. We have sub-councils. Besides Asian American, we have an African American council, a Latinx council, a women's council, and then we also have representatives from the Native American and LGBTQ communities. And our role is to give advice to the senior executive management of Comcast on areas such as the workforce, on procurement, on community and philanthropic activities, on corporate governance, and really not just to share best practices, but to really push the company to be a leader with respect to diversity and inclusion. And I surely don't view our work as being charitable or philanthropic. I view it as simply being good business. And Comcast now is a multinational company, and really its business, like many other companies, right, are undergoing a lot of challenges right now. And I really see our role as more important than ever to help the company, get through this crisis, and to recognize, as many of the other speakers have noted, that even though this pandemic has, left no corner of our globe untouched, we really are seeing the disparate impacts that it has had within certain segments of our community.
So racial injustice for Asian communities are on rise since the corona pandemic outbreak. As the vice chair of the Asian Diversity Council, can you tell us if the companies are setting up any programs or policies to provide support if employees are experiencing any discrimination during these times?
Well, I know Comcast has set aside $500 million for all of its employees, no matter their background, whose jobs are directly affected by the pandemic. So as you know, Comcast, like any other company, they have employees who do have desk jobs, right? Who can, employees who can easily perform their duties remotely from home and safely. But they also have a lot of cable technicians, right? People whose jobs are essential workers, right? Because they're trying to maintain our networks and our systems for the country, and and a lot of their jobs, are not capable of being performed remotely. So they've set aside this money to make sure that any of their workers, if their jobs are suspended or affected during this pandemic, they have the money to pay for that and to support them. One of the things that, Comcast, being also a media company and, a multi-platform television and other type of entertainment company, they've also used that platform to do a lot of public service announcements. So you might have seen, these 30-second spots promoting best practices like washing your hands and wearing masks. And one of the things that our council, along with executive management, successfully pushed NBC to do was to expand those efforts to address exactly the issue that you brought up, is that Asian Americans, in addition to suffering the economic and the health impact of the pandemic, have also been the victims, right, of blame, right, for, given the origins of the virus from Wuhan, China. So They've actually, most recently did a virtual town hall on NBC Asian America, highlighting this issue. They made, it known that ever since we started tracking self-reports of attacks on Asian Americans, there have been close to 2,000 self-reported incidents since mid-March alone of attacks on Asian Americans. And also beyond that, right? Beyond turning, beyond raising awareness and even turning incidents like that into a spectacle. I'm sure you guys have seen, viral videos of such incidents of hate, but also trying to educate the public that it's not enough to be aware, right? Every one of us has an obligation as a bystander to step up and really try to intervene if something like that does happen in front of you, and how to safely do so. And how as a community, right, it's not enough to condemn those types of violent acts or hateful acts, right? That we have this common responsibility to step up in the moment, stand by the victims of those incidents, and let it be known that you also will not tolerate that kind of behavior. So, and to model the right type of behavior. So hopefully, that type of programming, and we've seen other channels now devote quality time, news segments to reporting on these incidents, and also, how the public should react if they should see something like that for themselves. So I think that's Comcast using their unique position to be able to put out that kind of programming to shine a light on it, because I think, without that kind of coverage, I think it'd be easy for people to dismiss that as a phenomenon that we should be worried about.
Thank you so much, Jenny. So my next speaker guest is Rubaya. Can you please unmute yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi.
Yeah, hi. So Rubaya, please let us know about your work as the founder and the executive director of ASHA, what it stands for, and then I will dive into the question for you.
Oh, thank you, Priya. Thank you so very much. During this pandemic and lockdown, this is, besides the topics, this is a unique opportunity of meeting all these great women leaders of the community globally. I'm so grateful to you and Somnathji for arranging the whole thing. And it is a means and way to express our concern that we are facing right now. So thank you once again. I would say that ASHA stands for Autism Society Habilitation Association. We are a small organization, nonprofit organization. We are focusing on mostly South Asian community who has a child with autism. So we know autism is a great spectrum disorder, but when we are actually facing a unique situation where we are a migrant community, and with a migrant community, we have our challenges financially, culturally. On top of that, we have a child with autism, with a disability, developmental disability. So that gives us an even tighter situation or a unique position where we are not accepted or we are a kind of cornered in the society. So our organization is focusing on bringing out this community and assimilate them with the mainstream community. So that was our focus. And so what many challenges our families are facing, like language, cultural disability, cultural differences, so and financial, of course. So those are the things we address. We create awareness among the different societies, different cultures, and we try to bring about all these parents and the children so that they can have the equal platform to express their thoughts. Towards that goal, we bring about different seminars. We bring about different speakers to talk about different issues. Also, we connect our population or our members to the government benefits, like whatever is available out there for our children. We try to connect them with the available resources. Plus, we are trying to create institution, a one-stop institution where our South Asian community can have a place to talk about their program, their problems, and they can talk about their children who are actually aging out from the school system. As you know, the school system is giving us a time where everybody is treated equally in the public school system up till 21 years of age. But when they age out, the real trouble starts emerging because the parents are aging right now, and our children, they are no longer children, they are now adults. And when there are some day have programs which are out there, but they are not, all of them are not culturally appropriate. So this population with autism, they find it very unsettling, and they don't feel at home. And so many of the adults, they go to a day program, and after a certain time, they don't feel it comfortable. They come back and they're staying with their parents. And so that becomes a bigger problem for the parents who are aging and who do not know how to tackle this population at home. So these are the issues we are tackling. That was before the pandemic started. And now with the pandemic, we are in such a desperate situation. I receive phone calls every day that how to keep this population entertained at home, because they don't understand pandemic, they don't know lockdown. And as parents, we are facing with new ideas, how to keep them entertained, how to keep them at home, how to put the masks on them, the very basic. So it is a challenge, and the unpreparedness of all of our community that we are now facing. We don't know why there was nothing out there for facing a pandemic. This is not something that cannot happen. This can happen. Unfortunate that it happened globally, but we should have the foresight that things can go wrong, and there should be an emergency policy, what to do in these situations. So that is in a way we are right now responding to families, what to do, how to do, and we are doing a lot of video calling to the parents, to the children, the schools, the teachers, the therapists. We are all putting together something to keep our population entertained.
Wow. So you just mentioned that you are a mother of a special needs child. So can you just share, like, and you are a migrant yourself, your roots are in Bangladesh. I mean, you know, we have a lot of services and opportunities that are available in the United States, but not necessarily in the other parts of the world.
Exactly.
Can you, and we have now audiences that are joining from all around the world. Can you share some of the tips that can be helpful for them, especially when they have special needs, you know, child in the home, that they can kind of, you know, make use of?
Yeah, surely. In fact, before this pandemic started, I was in Bangladesh. And in Bangladesh, I was actually looking into a couple of organizations who are really working with children with autism, with developmental disability. So in Bangladesh, I should point out that the lack of awareness was there before, but right now, due to the governmental policy, it has becoming greater awareness all over the community. And so what they're doing, a couple of good things in those Asian communities is the family unity, and the families are very well connected. So the support comes from the family first. So if I saw that the families over there are more sympathetic, or they're more united, even in quarantine times. they are having more people to support the parents with their children. So that is one thing good, but there is other things like financial crisis and also available resources. That is lacking on those community, I should say, because people, the level of poverty is very high. And when you have a child with autism and with a lockdown, you are at home, your financial crisis is at a point where you have no other way but to go out to for your financial needs. And when you are going out, you are exposing yourself. And when you are coming back, you have a child who doesn't understand, he doesn't understand quarantine. They want to come very close to their parents, and that is a threat. So I should say that this kind of situation needs to be addressed, that how we can keep this population separated from their parents, or to create a system or create a support group who will look after this population while the parents are outside for their livelihood. I think that is most important right now.
Thank you so much, Rubaya. So my next question is to Julie. Julie, can you please unmute yourself?
Hello. Hi.
Hi. So Julie is joining us from the UK. Thank you so much for joining. So first I would like you to introduce yourself, and then I'm going to go into the question. So Julie is a very successful recording artist, and we would like to hear her journey from being done recording with George Michael to being an educator first. What is that journey like?
Well, I mean, I've been involved in the music industry for 40 years now, which is scary because I'm only 12. But yes, it's really, I've had so many incarnations because really, essentially, I'm a singer-songwriter. I started off singing jazz very young, and then I've got my own label. I started a licensing company, publishing, and I've also taught all the way along. And when you're an artist, a musical artist, you have to find ways to make money lots of different ways. So you also become a bottle washer, and whatever happens to you becomes part of your whole experience as an artist. And that's good. And I was also a single mum all the way through that time. So yes, I have worked with some amazing people, but it's just been a really long road as an artist myself in developing a teaching system, because through the voice, I realized that the spirit is manifest in the voice, and that can apply to everybody. And so I've gone basically from being somebody that taught because I was an artist that taught what I believed was something people wanted to hear, to realizing the value of it was something very different than where I started. So yes, I started off in jazz, ended up working with George Michael for a very brief time, and lots of crises happened at that time. And the music business has been through an incredible crisis in that time. But for me personally, I wanted to deal with this on a very personal level. This is why I've just come in the middle of that, because when we're talking now, we're talking very much about, you know, the global effects and all of the things we're talking about. For example, you know, the racism, all of these events that were happening anyway before the pandemic, the sort of like the light that shone on it. And what I've been talking about all the way through since about last 12 years ago, I had a personal health crisis, which made me have to really reevaluate everything I did before in terms of the way I worked as an artist, how I worked as a teacher, and how that impacted other people that I was teaching. And the music business has basically been in crisis through a mental health crisis for some time now. And through my own desire to find ways to go into recovery myself from the personal experience of chronic illness to the mental health, the inevitable mental health issues that came from that, I wanted to try and sort of bring ways to understand it through collaboration with other artists as well that I was working with. So with an organization called Help Musicians, we've been really focusing on what's happening with musicians. Before the pandemic happened, we were already in a crisis where we realized that musicians were 3 times more likely to be suffering from mental health crisis. In America, it's 50% more likely. You know, there's 50% of musicians reporting severe mental health crisis. And there's just, it's a very fragmented business. It's not even something you can get hold of anymore. All the major institutions are not there. It's more a discourse than the music business. So we have nothing to hold on to and to go to for our care. There's nowhere that has a duty of care for us. So my work has been about trying to find ways to bring other interventions, mental health interventions, that are actually useful on a very personal level through everything we do, and to try and do something different. Because the reality is that even though lots of people are talking about, just talk about your stuff, bring up the mental health stuff, there's no actual resources at the end of that question. When you say, I am suffering, I need help, there's no resources there, because it's been same everywhere globally, massively underfunded, fragmented mental health services that are just taken to breaking point. And so we have to look at this. I mean, because I was talking about it in terms of the industry, like the GDP provided by the entertainment industry in Britain alone is something like 8%. Do you know what I mean? It's huge. And yet that's not putting anything back into the health of the people that are producing the intellectual property that makes the profit for that industry. So I was just trying to get a bit more personal about it, because it becomes so broad. When we were talking about racism and the problems we're having with that in the context of the virus and what's happening with the pandemic, I wanted to say what's happening is I think it's sort of amplifying all the issues. It's not that we didn't know that, but we sort of almost were blinded to it. And this sort of reflective period where we're looking at all those issues in sort of under a microscope and really beginning to say this, we've been sort of closing down to it because it's been so overwhelming. And now we've got no option but to reflect and look at all the individual issues that are going on. And for me, there was already, we've got to sort of step ahead, because in the music business, we already knew we had a crisis on our hands. We already knew we had to start thinking about other interventions and other ways to work. And one of the things that's come across is the absolute requirement for collaboration and full interaction with each person, you know, because unless we are really committed to that, we can't make any differences. We've got, like, in a year's time, if you're suicidal now, in a year's time, we might give you 6 lessons of CBT or well-being training. This isn't working anymore. And the difference to the pandemic is it has brought with it, it basically follows, the mental health crisis is trailing behind the pandemic in terms of the veracity of its incidents, like the reported mental health crisis and the suicide rate is basically following exactly, and it's got a tail behind it, and it's going to have a much longer, far-reaching effect after the pandemic is over. And yet it's the one thing we are not investing in. There's nothing, even, we're only just beginning to talk about that, and yet that's actually much more of a crisis, because all of the issues we're talking about, whether racism, whether movement of immigrants, what we're going to do about every crisis we have. We all know about the intersectional events that impact those. But what we're saying is we've got another whole layer of trauma and mental health issues that are impacting that as well. And we can't simply put that aside and say we deal with mental health separately. We deal with this separately. We all have to come together and say this is a global pandemic. It's followed by a global mental health pandemic. And what are we going to do? We're not going to just talk about talking about it. We've got to invest in it, because we're going to have non-productive people. It really shows up in the music business, because if the suffering that happens in the with the mental health of an artist in terms of their ability to function as an artist and produce something that's, you know, worthy and productive going forward in their lives is totally eradicated by mental health crisis. And so that's why we've already been talking for a few years about this in that industry particularly, but we've not been doing anything about it. And so I found it really interesting that everybody's talking about the issues, but really we're just amplifying what we already were working with, aren't we? We already knew all these things, and what's happened is it's under a microscope, and what we do, it's different. So really, yes, I'm an artist first, last and everything, but through teaching and through having chronic illness myself, it led me to understand something of what we need to do now. And being able to share that, I find it really interesting that we're talking about the same things we've all been banging on about for ages but they're really amplified, and there's nowhere to run and hide anymore, because we're forced into reflection and forced into making very solid decisions about where we're going to go forward with our lives, you know. And I'm actually quite excited about that, in between being freaked out a lot of the time. So really for me, it's about finding new ways to deal with the mental health and the spiritual health of everybody going forward, because if we don't deal with that first, nothing else is going to emerge, and nothing's going to change about those things that we're talking about, you know, because it has to come down to the individual. And that's really what I'm trying to do, really. And the research I'm trying to do is I was working, for example, with women mainly, because women are so underrepresented in the music business. It's ridiculous. At the top end, something like 7% are women. It's and I work in electronic dance music with DJs, and I was going to be doing work, collaborating and working with women on the ground. And I can't believe that we're here where we are now in terms of this moment in time, and women are still, as one of the earlier speakers said, still not valued and equal members of this society anywhere, even in the Western world where it looks cool, and even in the sort of industry where there's lots of lip service to this. So I think that one of the things I realized, so I will finish in a minute, was that in electronic dance music, it's mainly men DJs, and it's a very male culture, but also what's happened is the suicides and drug abuse in men is huge. And that's because there's no balance, there's no women there, there's no ability to function in a normal way and interact and bring the value that women would bring to that environment. And that's one of the reasons why I think one of the main things is bringing women in there and demanding to be in an equal position, no longer saying, oh, we'll work towards funding a little bit of a girls' project or a women's project here. All the women's projects that have been put into supporting women in the music business by the publishing rights societies and by the charities that give funding have had no difference in terms of the impact of women's position and representation in the industry. So I didn't want to sound negative on the end there. I will finish now. So that's me, and that's what I'm trying to do.
So we have only 20 minutes remaining. So I'm just going to move to the next speaker because we have a lot to cover yet. So my next speaker is Heidi. Heidi, can you please unmute yourself? Hi, so please let us know about your work with Dream Tank, because you are training the leaders of future. What is Dream Tank all about?
Dream Tank is about unleashing all of our incredible ideas and our dreams and all of our desires that we would like to see in the world, and reverse engineering it back into now, and putting together a superhero team with youth innovation and youth leadership at its core. Because Dream Tank believes that those with the best imaginations have been stuck in schools that have not been serving the future we want to create, right? And so Dream Tank started about 4.5 years ago. It was created as a response to something that I saw was drastically missing in the conversation around solving and addressing the Sustainable Development Goals and the moonshots that those represent, which each one of them really is. And actually they work so much more together, not in boxes. And so I started realizing, you know, the interconnectedness of all of these different goals. And in 2016, I was on a panel at a family office conference. I had been doing impact investing with philanthropists, high net worth individuals, family foundations, corporate foundations. I was at UBS, I had been at Acumen, and I had been working with people to align their money as energy. Money I look at as energy. Money has, we can align money as energy with what we want to create in the world. And so I was bringing feminine energy and spirituality into the finance world. I was at UBS and working a lot with on developing women's platforms and millennials who were inheriting a lot of money and wanted to do things differently. So I had left UBS and started a firm, a finance firm specifically focused on women and millennials and consciousness of money and impact investing education, both from the right brain and the left brain, more internal. How do we create peace within ourselves? And how do we become the self-expressed humans that we're really here to be? And feel the joy of connecting with each other and the joy of being human, which so many of us have not had the opportunity to do in the world that we have created, in the system that we've created. And so I was at this conference, and I'm also a mother. I have an 11-year-old son named Cody and a 14-year-old daughter named Summer. 4.5 years ago, so Summer was about 10 years old. And I was on a panel and the moderator, and I was supposed to be talking about impact investing and women's investing. And the moderator asked, what would you do if you had 1 year left to live? And that was not a prepared question. I did not have that question ready, you know, and in that moment, I don't know if many of you, Julie, some of you have mentioned this, like, you know, I look at life as a hero's journey, right? And a lot of us have been called to really, really hard situations precisely so that we can become strong and overcome them and then help others. So all of us here on this call, I think, have all gone through really hard things in our own lives respectively, specifically designed for our own growth and mastery. And so when I was on this panel and they asked me that question, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I had this moment where it was just like a bolt of lightning. And I thought, if I'm going to leave the planet in 1 year, I would have to have, I have to do something big, and I have to spend time with my kids. and so just in that essence, I thought, what would I leave on the planet that might not be here if I didn't do it? And what came to me in that moment was, we needed to leap forward so radically. We were doing everything so in these separate little sectors, right? And I've been in impact investing and social entrepreneurship, and we've been all trying to squeeze these beautiful innovations with different types of liquidity needs into old systems, right? And so I just thought, it's too incremental. It's too much separate sector. We're not working together. I don't know how we're ever going to get there. All of this came to me in that moment. And then it hit me. We need the best imaginations in the world working on our problems now. And that we need to unleash them and liberate them from this system and this mill that we are putting them through that is not relevant for the world we want to create. And I said in that moment, I would start a think tank for youth and listen to what their ideas are on how we can solve the world's problems. And it evolved into a mix of an entrepreneurship accelerator and think tank with design thinking, mentors. But really, it's 4 years later, what's happened is we've been experimenting radically and working with young people to design the programs, getting feedback. We brought a lot of youth leaders to help run the organization through fellowships and applied learning from their university or high school or even middle school fellows. So so we've been building these in-person programs and this toolkit to scale to other countries. And our plan this year was going to be online. And a year ago, we did a strategic plan that said we would like to activate 1 billion young people by 2030 who are all connected. And we all, as women and communities, are supporting and investing in our youth now to help them lead and come up with the most amazing ideas that we haven't even thought of. And we support them, right? By mentorship, partnership, cross-generational leadership. We can reinvent almost any industry with the imagination of children. And I've seen this at work. And so during this, that was our goal. And I'm a mom, single mom half the time. I have a co-parent. So when my kids are here, mom, cooking, cleaning, house stuff. I mean, all the things you have to do, plus the teaching, plus everything on top of it while trying to run this organization and look at how to pivot it. And I had just gotten back from Davos where I met you, Priya. And this was in February where I started to realize what was happening with the coronavirus right after Davos. And so we had this goal. We thought we were going to start creating an online curriculum a little bit later this year. Again, get to 1 billion in 10 years. People even thought that was crazy a few months ago that I said that. Now, coronavirus presented a portal. That's the way we look at it. It's a portal. And what we did was we said, let's see what the youth would like to do during this time. They're home. They don't have a lot of activities. Their parents are running around trying to figure out how to survive, how to pivot their businesses, how to make money. They're confused. There's mental health challenges. There's actually now have been suicides of really young people, which is a travesty of epic proportions. And they're sitting at home just doing this mindless stuff. And honestly, the online schooling, I'm going to say something really bold, and it might offend some people. I'm not going to say it any way other than love. I've heard this from many, many, many young people, right? And teachers are trying so hard, right? But these young people are seeing this and saying, why are you trying to squeeze stuff that I will never use for the new world into an online format, right? Why are you trying to make me do algebra that will never be used in the world? Budgeting, financial literacy, entrepreneurship, all those things, that's what they will use, right? So now I'm not debating education. I'm just saying that we owe it to our youth to take a stand and say, we will not go back to business as usual. We will not go back to school as usual. We will not go back to artists not getting paid as usual, right? We will create a world with this new digital economy and unified community, which I have seen the walls break down. we have been able to reach, the doors have been flying open. This incredible youth team has been running a global online design challenge for young people. And your son, Anshuman, is one of those fellows. He's amazing. I can't believe that, I can believe the genius of these youth, but I have a feeling with when all of you here get a chance to hear what some of these kids will be doing. We're doing a collective impact summit on June 5th. I would like to invite all of you. We have the ideas that were submitted from young people around the world on how to address the effects of the pandemic, both economic, healthcare, mental health, economic restructuring, and education. And we want an open innovation. We wanted to see how young people would reinvent things and solve problems during this time. And we're going to help them do it. So on June 5th, we're going to be swarming around and doing collective impact breakout groups. So the ideas can be both integrated into those who are already trying to solve those problems and partner up, or they can be supported because they've never been heard of before. And so we're going further than any other hackathon we've done. The youth have really taken a stand. They've said, we want to do it this way. And guess what, Heidi? We think we can get 1 billion youth in 1 year, and we're going to do it. And here's what we're going to do. And we have a young man in Delhi, actually India, who is leading our global lead team to expand to pretty much all countries within a year. To bring together a group of 1 billion, at least 1 billion young people who are finding, funding, and implementing the best ideas to create the dream world we'd like to see in the world, and not ever have us go back to business and school as usual. And they have a plan. I believe it. And not just me, a lot of our advisors believe it. They see it. And we're being offered all kinds of opportunities on bricks, television, and lots of distribution. We can't respond to everything, so we've taken a 2-week pause to get a little bit more capacity, partners. We literally are overwhelmed with interest, and it's amazing. And when the young people that we've noticed are activated, the hope ripples through all of us. We all get activated whenever we hear a young person talk about their ideas and dreams. It keeps us in a frequency of co-creation, positivity, and really truly holding hands and jumping through this portal together. I just personally, I really don't want my personal experience with my son. He is so smart and started creating music on his own during the time that he was supposed to be doing online school. And we discovered that he hadn't done most of his assignments, even though we thought he had been. And I sat with him and asked why. He said exactly this. He said, it's boring, it's pointless, I'm not learning anything new, I'm not being graded, and it's irrelevant. Why should I do it? And I honestly didn't have a good answer for him. So I was just sitting there like, oh God, like laughing, and to myself, like, oh, not laughing, it's funny, not funny. So I'll just close with that right now. I'm very excited, and I'm interested in partnering with everyone here in any way possible. Our youth team has been messaging me, some of who are on the call, a young woman leader who's created a telemedicine program for the entire country of Uganda, which is really exciting. So sorry, I'll stop.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I want to cover the youth because they are our future, and we have only 5 minutes remaining. So I hope that I will be able to give the closing remarks. So I want to invite very quickly Himali from India, Himali Rawat. Are you unmuted? So Himali, very quickly, you are a second-year medical student, and you have actually, this pandemic has made all the medical students practically doctors. This is a practical, opportunity for you to do everything hands-on. So quickly tell us, because I want to go to our last speaker as well, who is a rising freshman. Has this pandemic actually given you more learning opportunities, or is there a lot of challenges that you students are facing as medical students? You are unmuted. Please unmute yourself. Mr. Gimre, can you unmute her? We cannot hear her. Okay, go ahead. Mr. Gimre, please unmute her. Yeah, go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes,
I audible now?
Yeah.
So first of all, my greetings to everyone on the panel. I feel very obliged to be on a panel with such highly acclaimed dignitaries. In the COVID-19 pandemic, medical education has been hit hard. In countries like USA and India, the medical students are not able to go to their colleges, and we are not able to use our potential to treat patients. While in countries like Italy, the medical students have been rushed into workforce, and they are practicing as general physicians and are able to treat people. But there are also positive aspects of this. We are using our lockdown period. We are attending online classes. We are giving online tests. We are getting more knowledge, reading more books, and applying those to help other medical students as well. We are creating the digital medical literature, which helps other students. And as a medical student who is not able to treat patients now, as of now, the biggest responsibility is to educate our family, our friends, and our neighbors about the corona crisis, because the fake news is in plenty in social media, and that's creating a ruckus around. And that's how we are helping currently.
So thank you so much. I would have loved to delve more into and ask you more questions, but I want to cover all the speakers. So my last speaker is a rising freshman and a very talented young youth leader, Aditi. So Aditi, what would have been a very busy, socially active time for you? Your age group is all in lockdown. So was it a problem adapting to this new change, or has it been very effective for you in order to plan for your future?
Well, first I'd like to just say thank you for letting me be on this panel. It's really inspiring. I'm about to enter college, and it's really great to see all you women leaders and how far you've come in your careers. And going back to your question, it certainly has been quite a difficult social time for seniors in college and seniors in high school like me right now. A lot of our events are going online, such as our graduation. But I think the more pressing situations for us right now would, like we've touched on already, would be relating to education and the economy. So a lot of students, such as myself, it's been more difficult to find financial aid to go to colleges. Especially because a lot of colleges right now are in deficit, at least in America, and a lot of students are, or their families are in economically not the best situations as we could have hoped for at this time. So I've seen a lot of students of my age actually joining state colleges and passing up opportunities to go to private schools where they could have maybe done better simply for the financial reasons. And we're not really sure how to fix this problem yet, but I'm hoping that with, reopening the economy, reopening the country a little bit, we can slowly start to get back into that kind of stage. And also, I've noticed a lot of things with education, how right now a lot of our school things are optional, and I think Heidi touched on this really well earlier. A lot of us are kind of, just bored with what we're doing, and a lot of students don't want to, tune into Zoom lectures to see things that they've already learned. So I certainly do think that it's been a challenging time for us just to adapt to these new circumstances, especially since there are a lot of low-income students who don't have access to the internet all the time. So trying to switch everything to an online format can be really difficult. And also, just in general, I think that we do need to make a lot of changes for students, especially in high school later on, just to make sure that, in the future, our education is more applicable to what we're learning, and it can help us deal with crises such as these.
Thank you so much. So we are actually over time, but since this Zoom meeting is still going on, I would love to give my closing remarks. But before that, I would like to invite Mr. Somnath Ghimre to just give a few words, like a minute or so, to just give some remarks, because this entire panel was coordinated and hosted by the GPK Koirala Foundation. So thank you, Mr. Ginre. Please, in a minute or so, give your remarks so then I can give my closing remarks.
Thank you, Priyaji, for your great moderation of this historic women leadership in the crisis of COVID-19. Thank you so much, all the speakers and participants, that we got a lot of information and knowledge to share among all people around the globe. So on behalf of GPK Foundation, our chairperson, former Deputy Prime Minister and former Foreign Minister of Nepal, Honorable Sujata Koirala, and myself, the President of GPK Foundation America, would like to thank you all from the bottom of our heart for this great event. And I hope all of our women, including men, learn from the great opinions, great views, and suggestions of our respected women leaders they have presented in this forum. So again, I would like to thank Priyaji and our team and all the sponsors who supported us in this situation, in the crisis of COVID-19, how to defeat, especially women leaders, women power is very important because they can negotiate any arguments in the crisis when we need. So thanks again. I hope all you stay safe and healthy, and let us defeat this COVID-19 all together as soon as possible. Thank you.
So now I will give my closing remarks, and thank you everyone for joining. So we heard from leaders from US, India, Nepal, Africa, and then we had participants also guests from all over the world. What I have learned and I've always seen is that women are better in managing crisis than their male counterparts, because our approach is transformational, never transactional. We show empathy, we show compassion, we show care. That's very important. So if we want to survive and we want to thrive, we want to make sure that the women voices are heard, because there are a lot of uncertainties that the entire world is facing. But the way women lead, the future is female. So thank you everyone for joining. It was a great session. I thank you all from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
May we take a picture together, because we're making history here.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Now you can unmute yourself, because now it's like we are in the green room. We can talk.
And does we have permission to post everyone's pictures and tag you?
Yeah, I hope so.
If you would like to share your LinkedIn so we can tag you, or Priya, you'll do that. But I would love to stay connected. This is historical, all of you. I am so inspired.
Yes, from my point of view, I am honored to meet you all the leaders. Thank you for sharing all your unique work, and please keep in touch. And I'm seeing your boy.
Okay, everybody take a picture, do something fun.
Okay.
All right. Have a good one, everyone.
One of our women leader from New York joined.
Great connecting with
Malini Saha, can you just say a few words, Malini Saha?
Okay.
Unmute your phone. We have still 2 more minutes left.
Yes, hello from New York. This was a wonderful meeting with an opportunity to see all of you, and Mrs. Kulwala also, namaskar, from New York. It's so wonderful to see you online, and having met you through Somnath Ji. We are going through a devastated crisis right now. I know Somnath was also very helpful in bringing our last roundtable of women together, where we are dealing with the issues of domestic violence and trafficking and suicides and all these things that are happening during this COVID-19 period. We're supposed to have another session in June. And I think, like I had said in my last Zoom, I think we can all come out of this stronger together. And most of you had said the same thing. It's about positivity and what is required of us to make it happen, and how can we motivate and help people and educate. Thank you.
Thank you, Malini-ji. Before we end up, there is one question requested to be answered by Queen Blessing. So during this pandemic, minorities are more affected than others around the world. How can this problem be addressed globally? Who should be responsible for it? Asked by Achut Raj Katel from Nepal.
So can you repeat? Sorry, I know time is up. I wanted to hear the question.
Okay, the question is again, during this crisis or pandemic of COVID-19, minorities are more affected than others around the world.
Right.
How can this problem be addressed globally? Who should be responsible for it?
Yes, you see, I often say that we cannot leave the work of the development for the government alone. So this is why it's very important that those of us leaders who have stepped up to have set up fund our own organizations is very important. So whether it's non-profit organizations, different impact leaders in different communities, we all have to step up. Because I know there's no time, but just know that my point is that the government has the responsibility of taking care of their own people, but we cannot afford to leave the work of the development of these various communities to the government alone. So we all must have that, what we call in Africa, Ubuntu philosophy, which is I am what I am because of you, because you are who you are. So if we have that togetherness attitude, it's easier for us to have the feeling of support for other people that are not just our immediate family members, and that we should not just leave this work to say, okay, it's the government that are doing the work, I'm not in the government, and so no. This is why women leaders, we are more needed than ever before. We have the intuition, to want the nurturing attitude. So we must nurture our own family and support the men, work with the men, work with our men to better our communities. Everyone is needed. We cannot afford to turn a blind eye to these issues.
Thank you so much, Queen's Blessing.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Any more questions for the speaker?
There is one question. Yeah, I just got it from Nepal itself, to our honorable deputy, former deputy prime minister and former minister of Nepal, and in the chairperson of GPK Foundation America. What is the most effective way or works the government of Nepal is doing to solve the crisis of pandemics in Nepal? This question was for the chairperson of GPK Foundation America in Nepal, and honorable former deputy prime minister.
Okay. Yeah. So the government is trying their best to distribute food to the needy people, but it is not very effective. Not very effective. It is not reaching the people who need it. So we are trying to be, as an opposition and from different party, we are supporting the government so they do the best job as possible. And they have, in the meantime, I felt the government was trying to use this pandemic for their power and politics, which was in the middle of the, suddenly in the middle of the situation, everything got very blown up in Nepal. And so we are supporting them, but at the same time, we are also giving warning to them that they are properly working, going to the people, meeting the needy people, and supporting the public there, which is effectively. So not doing politics at this time when people are suffering. People need the help. Also the frontline workers, they are suffering. Their lack of equipments, lack of instruments are giving them a lot of problems. So the government needs to fulfill all these things.
Thank you for your answer. Next, just got here from Kunwa Durba from South Korea, asking to Jenny Lau. She spoke about the business or economic viewpoint. Business or economic viewpoint. What do you think gonna happen the economy situation after the post COVID-19?
I wish I had the answer to that. I do think it will be very specific to each industry and to each type of business, right? So a few companies are thriving during this pandemic. I mean, we're using the product of one of those companies, Zoom. But, I think, ultimately every company has to figure out. So, interestingly, the pandemic has forced a lot of companies to be innovative, right, in their response to the pandemic. And I think what they've figured out is that a lot of the changes that they were forced to make actually might make business sense even after the pandemic. So I think there is a little bit of a silver lining in that it's forced them to take risks and to do things differently. And they might actually realize, oh, this actually makes sense for us even after the crisis is over, and it actually is a better way to do business. So just to give an example, my most recent company, we had a huge travel budget because we believed that our best negotiations had to be face-to-face, and that was the way we were used to doing business. And a lot of our customers were in Asia, so our travel budget was enormous. And of course, once everything shut down, you couldn't really do business that way anymore. And then they realized, oh my gosh, we're actually still able to negotiate deals and get business done without meeting face-to-face. And they're actually saving a lot of money in terms of travel expenses. So I'm hopeful that there will be, there will be a silver lining. There will be a lot of lessons learned. But right now, I mean, I think so many companies are just in survival mode. They probably don't have the luxury, right, to learn those lessons just yet. But we will get through this. It just might mean that a lot of companies will look a lot differently, operate, differently. But maybe those changes are for the best because, as someone else mentioned, this will happen again. And hopefully we won't be caught as flat-footed because we've been through it once before, and we'll be able to, our muscle memory will be there. We'll be a little bit more agile. We'll be able to, make the changes that we need to make much more quickly, and hopefully at less cost to human lives as well as economically.
Thank you, Jenny Liu, for your answer. I just got another question from Nima Lama from New York to Heidi Kupari. What do you think gonna happen in the education policy post-COVID-19 that you had mentioned about the algebra as an example, that our children, our kids can learn through the virtual learning? What do you suggest post-COVID-19, the new or whatever your idea about education policy?
Well, my idea is that the youth help design their own education system with us, and that we support them and get the best experts to back up how, I mean, most industries where you have almost like 90, there's a lot of research that shows, I don't know any young person that actually says that they love going to school the way it is every single day. and this thing has propagated, right? So I think that why not give them a chance to help design their own education system? They know technology better than any of us. How many of you have asked a younger person to help you with technology, right? Many, right? A lot of them were born, you know, even in the most remote areas, people have phones. And the younger people, in a lot of cases, are very adept with the technology. So let's give them a chance to design their own education system based on the world we want to all create together. So that's my recommendation, is that this group of youth leaders partner up with all of us, and then we can, and they can change, go implement and create their own system while we're all at home together. And that I don't think that it's going to be effective going to government and saying, we want you to change the education system, but we need you to figure it out. We think it's going to be more effective if we say, we want to change it and we've designed it and we have a whole global partnership around us that want to change it together. And you don't have to even do that much. We're going to use market forces, entrepreneurship, cross-sector collaboration. We see it problem solving as more effective in lobbying, also with legislation, than an old way of being right and wrong, right? A lot of times people, negotiations and things break down when somebody's needs aren't being met, right? So for example, you can't tell somebody, this is an example of collective impact that we talk to the kids a lot about, and the young people, is an example in Costa Rica where they do unsustainable palm oil practice, right? And the environmental community says, stop, you're polluting, right? But those people need another way to make money if you want them to stop doing something that's unsustainable, right? So when you're trying to legislate, you can't just tell people to stop doing something if they don't have another opportunity. So we're really looking at listening to the needs of everyone in a society and in a system, and solving those problems so that we can get beyond this field of right and wrong. That's my favorite Rumi poem. I don't know if any of you ever, there's a field beyond right and wrong, I'll meet you there. That's the summary of it. And that's where we're trying to get to. And when we're talking about issues with racism, we're talking about issues, all these things, how are we going to change this? My answer to that is empower the youth, because they don't see this. A lot of them are just adopting it from us as they get older, from the system. They don't see this. There's 16 genders that the young people are embracing right now. They don't even see woman, you know, that is not in their DNA, this next generation, the younger ones. But when it becomes that, it's because we've made them go in, they've been in this system, right? So if we can have that unity consciousness at the young age and support that, they can help us all melt all of our walls, right? Because I've seen, I'm sure you've all seen, like, people change things when their children question them too. CEOs, there was I think an article in the New York Times that said CEOs have changed courses drastically because of their teenage children asking them questions. So that's my recommendation. Invest and empower the youth, support, give them the information they need to solve problems, cross-generational systemic change and collective impact with our big goals, and going to create this change together unapologetically, because they have a right now to take things a little further than what we've done before. And this is not, and this is different. We're looking at youth as being wise beings who are equal with all of us. This is not, isn't this a cute youth program? This is, we believe youth are a wellspring for the world, and they are ready to be empowered. They are ready to take action, and we need to unleash them, get out of their way, and support them and partner with them and help them implement the ideas. So that's my recommendation. Oh, I don't hear you. You're on mute.
Mr. Gimre, you're on mute.
Sorry. As Priya has earlier requested me to extend the time, so I requested extended time till 1 p.m. here, so it's more. And this is the last question that I received from Africa to the, let's see.
While we're waiting, can I just share something about Nepal?
Sure, go ahead. 2 minutes.
I have this singing bowl I got from Patant Square, and I was in Nepal, and one of my most incredible experiences that led to the creation of Dream Tank was in Nepal. So I'm excited to talk to the you about that another time. But it's a beautiful, beautiful country.
Wow.
I start a lot of our sessions with that Nepal singing bowl.
So, as I think from Africa, Kenya has asked for donors for Africa. What is your plan disruptive of this pandemic post COVID-19 to defeat in African region?
Okay, so my response would pretty much be that this is no longer time for nonprofits to just be nonprofits and seek assistance from government. I think it's no longer business as usual. What COVID-19 has done for us back home is to expose the gaps and the lapses that are in operation presently in government. So both in our healthcare system, both in our educational system, both in just literally supporting businesses back home. So what I think nonprofits should start doing post-COVID-19 is to ask government to become more accountable. I think it's time for us to move past just running nonprofit organizations to actually becoming advocates for change, systemic change. Why do we have a mental health bill that is not yet signed into office, right? I mean, after 13 years, you have presented a bill to the House, but you still torture people who are living with mental health issues and they don't have access to mental health care. So we need to begin to hold government more accountable for certain things that they are supposed to have done and they are yet to do now that there is post-COVID-19. Something else I wanted to mention was innovation. What COVID-19 has shown us is that we can no longer do business as usual in the nonprofit sector. How do we include innovation, technology in some of the solutions that we offer to government or that we offer to humanity, right? How do we begin to include more technology? I mean, if you look at the work of some people that I know, Rendra Foundation that is providing financial facilities to women in rural communities. How can the government ramp up such interventions, especially in communities that are not reached? How do they ramp up interventions in the ecosystem of sustainable development, especially for communities that are into sustainable health and lifestyle? So I just really believe that this is the perfect time for us to transit from just being non-profits to becoming advocates for change, systemic change, and especially change that can be replicated in the long run. That would be my recommendation. It's no longer time to be quiet. It's now time to say, what is government doing with the budget? Why do we have 6% allocated here? Let us hold government accountable and move from asking for funding to demanding accountability from government and our representatives. That would be my recommendation. Thank you.
Another question for 2 minutes left to Rami and Desai. What has the population or what has the government of India planned if there is any crisis for hunger post COVID-19?
Well, I think the government of India is very well prepared. We are in excess of food grains. And I think that is not even a near possibility at this point, because we have so much of food grains in storage that we are actually worried that it may go to waste. So I don't think that is really a possibility. But I can tell you what the government has done during this pandemic to ensure that everybody is fed. To bring to your notice, India might not have a woman that leads it, but India does have a finance minister that is leading the world's 5th largest economy and the 2nd largest population. And her budget for pandemic relief reflected the empathy that comes with being a woman. So, for example, the ration the allotment of ration that people below a certain income group get was doubled by her. Not just that, the ration that women get was doubled, because she obviously knew that if women were empowered, the woman would also in return look after 4 to 5 members of her family. Not just that, gas cylinders were made free for 3 months while we would be under lockdown. Gas cylinders is what they cook on. As well as for 3 months, money was put, free money was put for 3 months to tide them over the period of lockdown where they would not be in employment. So I think what India had done with its ration as well as with its sensitivity towards its population has been commendable. To add to that, it has also doubled the loans that self-help groups run by women have access to. So I think at this point, we are extremely, extremely happy. And post-COVID, we have 10% of our GDP has been allotted in a huge relief package that has come from the government. So I think at this point, we have absolutely no worry about being at a loss of food grains, to the point that dependent on the region that you're in, the free food grains that have been doubled, you will have a choice of which food grain you would prefer. So depending on the region that you're in and what your preference is. Thank you.
So we will have the recording available, and I will share it with everyone, all the speakers, and if any attendees want to go over it and have any questions. So you all have my information or Mr. Gimre's information. Feel free to reach out if you have any further questions for any of the speakers, so that can be followed up. With that being said, thank you very much for your time, and good evening, good afternoon, good night.
And lastly, I would like to request our honorable chairperson of GPK Foundation and former Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Nepal for her thank you.
Thank you, Somnathji. Thank you. Thank you.
To all the participants on your behalf, can just a note of thanks.
Yes, I like to thank everyone. It was wonderful sharing knowledge and to get to know everybody from all around the world. And Priyaji, I want to especially give you a lot of thanks and hope you will come to Nepal soon to visit us after the pandemic. And Somnathji also, thank you to you. Thanks to you. This was wonderful to listen to everybody. So knowledgeable people and wonderful ladies, you know. I'm really so happy. All of you are invited to Nepal.
Happy. I can't wait. I will take you up on that.
I'm looking forward as well.
I will definitely.
To Nepal by our chairperson.
Hi. When is Nepal going to be open for travel?
Well, we have, I don't know, it's so uncertain. Everything is uncertain. It is likely to be hit hard in Nepal. It is a least developed country.
Oh, don't call it. It soars in spirituality.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Well, let's say
Bye-bye.
namaste. Namaste.
Bye-bye.
Namaste, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye.
यसको भिडियो पाइन्छ
I'll send you.